Hello, and welcome to episode 17 of What If Civilization Started Over. In the last episode, we saw 3 East Asian crusades, the third of which went very badly for the Orange Religion and Crusaders. So if you didn't watch that, then definitely go do that. But with that, we're going to get right into the next one, which is episode 17. And I teased a lot of things at the end of the last episode, a lot of which I don't remember exactly what I teased, but I'm pretty sure one of the things I teased was a major war in East Asia, so let's do that. And we're going to have to go to further... Actually, we're going to go to the ideologies layer for this, because the religion layer doesn't really matter, it's more the ideologies. And what's essentially going to happen is the Third Crusade was so embarrassing that the Yellow River Valley is immediately going to launch a Fourth Crusade, and they want to get China in on it, and they know the way to do that is to launch it against these 3 dark green religion countries. And so basically, there we go. Now they have a monarchy ideology. They're not going to be part of this. I just forgot to give them an ideology. Yeah, so I can just mark the countries on the alliances layer that are going to be in on this, but it's going to be Yellow River Valley, Yangtze, China, West Yangtze, Mongolia, and Manchuria will all be in on this crusade. So those are the 6 countries that are attacking, and the 3 countries that are defending are North Burma, South Burma, and Vietnam. I'm just going to call them Vietnam. I can't come up with a better name for them. And something you might notice is that the orange countries are way stronger than the green countries, so that you might not expect this to go well for the green countries. But China will go first as they start their invasion into Southeast Asia, and it's going very well because China alone is stronger than Southeast Asia. As Yangtze troops, as well as Yellow River Valley troops and Mongolian troops, will all line up along the Burmese border with West Yangtze as they all start pummeling in. China actually doesn't really send that many troops in, but there are troops that are sent through China that I'm going to use the Chinese color to mark. No, actually, never mind. Screw that. And, very quickly, these guys are fully captured. They don't surrender at all. They don't even have time to. As these troops will then continue marching into South Burma. And they kind of want to show China, hey, China, you can't just take all the land out of this, because we also are doing stuff. Meanwhile, China is just methodically taking cities from Vietnam and then slowly extending their front line so they can actually control the cities. And they're not dealing with South Burma at all, because they want their allies to deal with South Burma, which is currently going well. And at this point, Vietnam calls on Indonesia to help them, and Indonesia really wants to unite Borneo, so they will start an invasion of Borneo, and China just kind of ignores them, so Indonesia just gets to take Borneo for free, which is neat. But that does anger China, who tries to start sending troops to take them back, but they only recruit troops from the Philippines, which is a silly idea, because although these troops are decently good at their jobs, the Philippines doesn't really like this, and the Philippines, as well as their troops on Borneo, will rebel from China and then retreat from Borneo. And China doesn't really put any troops into trying to stop this, so for now they will just keep their independence, and ideology-wise they're going to be a monarchy. As the ideology of monarchy is becoming more and more acceptable, but we actually have to start showing alliances now, so give me one sec. And for temporary alliances, I'm just going to make the aggressors red and the defenders blue. So you can now see who's on which side, because ideologies are no longer going to cut that. Despite China kind of suffering internally, they're still doing well externally, as in against the Crusade, or against the Vietnamese, as they capture yet another city and start making their way towards this city. And Vietnam is really struggling to defend as the southern forests are fully taken. And China is now pushing west, and South Burma has fully fallen at this point, which means that everyone is invading into Vietnam. The Philippines will have a naval engagement with China right around here. The Philippines Navy is right here, and the Chinese Navy is pushing up against them right here. And they have a major battle that the Chinese actually win. And this will allow for the Chinese to make a landing on the Philippines and start trying to get towards the Filipino capital. But the Philippines actually have a major defensive win that pushes the Chinese back, as they are only holding this one city in the Philippines, but their navy does kind of control the entire South China Sea, which is not good for the defenders. But something is going to happen to save the defenders, as East India has had enough, or not East India, North India has had enough of their people who are just a slightly different sect from them being abused by people who are a completely different religion from them. And although the Lime religion has been being persecuted in these countries, they've had enough, and they are going to join in on the side of the defenders. And obviously, they're gonna not announce that they're joining in. So they will join in sneakily, and they will first, whatever. I'm gonna restore them with different colors, I guess. Sorry if you cared about the colors of these countries. I'll try to remember what colors they were. But anyway, North India starts by pushing into the capital of this country, and this, you know what we're gonna say is these two countries have like kind of fully collapsed to the point where it doesn't make sense to even show them as being part of these alliances, or of the defending alliance, because their governments are like fully collapsed. But North India is pushing in as they take this city, and they try to cut off the Crusaders' supply lines. However, that doesn't work, as the Crusaders will start their own invasions, as they start pushing back North India, who's not as strong as they thought they were. And this city is starting to get surrounded, as North India wasn't really defending their border very well, and a large number of troops get encircled in this city, which is now under siege. And North India really tries pushing it from like a lot of different directions to try and like free the city, which ends up making them lose land elsewhere, including this city. They never actually end up getting to the city, because once they get really close, a massive push is made and a major general dies, as North India is getting just kind of clobbered. But this has taken a lot of the pressure off of Vietnam. So they have started actually... Oh god, they're the same color as these guys. Okay, new plan. Okay, we're gonna just say that these are Yangtze troops invading, because they mostly are, or not Yangtze, Yellow River Valley. Just because the two greens, you wouldn't be able to tell who was which country, because Vietnam is starting to liberate South Burma, as well as going deeper and deeper into their own territory, as China doesn't really know what's happening. But basically, Yellow River Valley's troops are kind of withdrawing from Vietnam, and that's what's allowing for this, because they have just captured this city and are pushing into North India, because they think that they can knock North India out of the war, or just even make North India not care enough about the war, so that they just like kind of sue for peace. Then the Crusaders, or the defenders, will be kind of screwed. But a lot of Indonesian troops are also helping out Vietnam. That's another reason why they're actually starting to push back. Unfortunately for the Philippines, they just lost a massive battle here, as the Chinese Navy makes a landing over here and starts encroaching upon the capital, which has fully lost all access to the coast and is being under siege right now. And another Chinese landing on this island will take it, because remember, the Chinese Navy is like basically supreme over the entirety of the Philippines, which have mostly fallen, with just the capital holding out. So Indonesia will withdraw their armies from Vietnam with Vietnamese approval, so that it's not a drastic collapse, because Vietnam knew this was happening, and will basically go to the Philippines and start helping them out, taking this island and reestablishing the Philippines there right before the capital falls. But let's go to the Navy, because the Chinese Navy is really powerful, obviously. They kind of control all the territory right up to like here, I'd say. But the Indonesian Navy is also decently strong, because they're a naval country that needs to have a strong navy, and so they control the land up to there. The Filipino Navy maybe controls some of this land. But a massive naval battle here will go in the Indonesians' favor, and that'll push the front lines of the Navy kind of all the way to here. And that allows for the massive taking back of Filipino land. Let's turn off the alliances layer. Of Filipino land all the way up to this island, as China is forced to withdraw. And a naval landing happens here for Vietnam that takes back this city, as China decides to withdraw fully from here, because there was just a massive naval defeat. Like a lot of their fleet got sunk. In fact, a majority of China's South China Sea Navy got sunk. They still have an East China Sea Navy, for reasons that will become apparent shortly. But that victory is pretty good. So despite North India being really on the back foot, they think that just them existing here is helping out, which it is. Although it's not helping out too much because Vietnam is still struggling. But Indonesian troops are now able to start flowing back in here, so that helps a little bit. However, China will declare the first ever conscription in history, and this is going to change the tide of the war very quickly, as all Chinese men between the ages of 18 and 25 are required by law to sign up for the military, and if they don't, they can get like excommunicated and then executed, because it is a crime to be excommunicated. That's just like a thing. South Burma's government actually has fled to these islands, but China, upon doing this, will have massive gains. So first of all, their army is the one that gains the best because, as they push Vietnam back all the way to here, with the other Crusaders taking this land. But China is willing to occupy this land as well as all of South Burma, and that helps the Crusaders as they start encroaching further into North India. But North India is able to twist the arm of East India, who already kind of wanted to join in. They're even more theocratic than North India is. But they will join in on the war. And that will slow down the advance of the Crusaders, but not fully stop it. Because the Crusaders are just so much more powerful than the defenders. So they'll take this city, but they'll kind of get stalled around here. As they start another invasion into East India now that they can, taking this city. The Chinese Navy will also benefit, pushing back the naval front line so they can start taking these cities, but it stops around here. So they're not able to take the south of the Philippines. However, they are able to finally take the capital of Vietnam, and after that, Vietnam very quickly starts to fall because they didn't have any other defending barriers. And just like that, Vietnam has fully fallen except for the south. And a lot of Vietnamese people flee there, creating a city there, which we'll call Singapore. As Singapore is the last holdout of Vietnam, China then goes to capture the old government of South Burma, which is on these islands. However, they actually massively navally fail, and it's kind of an embarrassment as their whole fleet sinks due to bad weather, as well as losing the naval battle here. And that gives Indonesia the confidence to help South Burma reestablish their government as they start pushing here. But obviously China with conscription is going to be able to stop that. But this city is holding out and is forced to be under siege. And at this point, the Chinese government is unpopular, especially in these areas that used to be part of Central Yangtze. And Central Yangtze will basically have enough of this, of conscription, and will rebel. Basically, they're going to be in the Defenders Alliance. And China will use conscription, will use their army to try and stop these, but the problem is a lot of their army was from this region. That was one of the regions they were conscripting from, so about like a fifth of their army, 20%, was from this region, and those people will kind of mutiny, and so China will be starting to invade, but it'll be very ineffective, or they will be very ineffective as they kind of get this far before stopping, and they basically call on the other Crusader states, or the other Crusaders, to help them out. So Yellow River Valley will start their own invasion, which is much more effective because they're not using conscription. Yangtze will try, but they're really weak, and actually Central Yangtze is stronger than Yangtze. And Western Yangtze will start pushing, but they'll only get about that far. So it's really Yellow River Valley who's doing a lot of the work here. But yeah, China's army becomes so ineffective in the south as well that Vietnam is able to start pushing back. And this mostly just happens because basically when they hear that Central Yangtze has rebelled, a lot of people start mutinying and being like, hey, let's help Central Yangtze get their independence. And so a lot of China's army is just kind of collapsing as they force occupation of South Burma to go back over to these guys so they can focus on Vietnam. But a massive break is about to happen for the invaders or /Crusaders as Central India has just joined the war against these guys, and the reason that could be amazing is because if they can knock East and North India out of the war, then all of the Crusaders can focus on, and this seems to be what's happening, all the Crusaders can focus on the southern threat, and East India will surrender very quickly, which is very alarming for North India, who's now surrounded. And North India begs Pakistan to join in, and Pakistan says no. As East India has their capital start to be threatened, or North India's capital starts to be threatened, but they still hold out. And it turns out Central India is not that powerful, but it is still a massive break because, I mean, look how well they're doing. And this allows for the Northern Crusaders to start pushing back against the South Burmese army, which pushes them all the way back to this city once again, which is defended well enough. And China is able to start pushing back against Vietnam. However, Indonesia makes a landing over here that China just wasn't navally defending this area, and they liberate that city, return it to Vietnam, and kind of are able to cut off this Chinese army here. And the Chinese army is able to make a very noble evacuation of this army, so their army does evacuate. That wasn't very good. However, China is strong enough that they are just able to push back again. And it feels like Sisyphus fighting against China, because no matter how much you win, you just keep losing. As this Burmese city falls and North India will surrender, Central Yangtze is fully destroyed, but I'm going to keep their color, so they're not fully destroyed. They keep one city, which was their de facto capital, but the rest of the country will fall. And the Philippines are starting to lose more territory as this island falls, as well as this island. And the Chinese have pushed the Vietnamese all the way back to Singapore, where they were previously, and are preparing for an invasion of Indonesia. Two things will happen that will completely change the tide of the war so thoroughly that it's like very clear who's going to win the war. And those two things are, one, Manchuria will switch sides, and two, Japan will join the war. To be fair to the Crusaders, Hokkaido then joins the war on their side, but I don't know how much that's going to help them, as very quickly Japan invades into Hokkaido, and Hokkaido is very weak, so Hokkaido does distract them for like a year, honestly. Like, it does take a full year for them to take out Hokkaido, and therefore the Crusaders have time to prep for invading these guys. But it does start another front, so it's not great. Less great is that North India will unsurrender, and since there were no occupying forces anywhere here, they're kind of just back in the war immediately. And they will immediately push in, basically liberate East India, as East India will push back very quickly, as they've got amazingly high morale, and they start an invasion into Central India, and North India will also do that. They're kind of fighting a two-front war, but Central India is like super shocked by this. They had kind of demobilized their army, which means they don't really have an army, and so all of the land up to this little pass will fall before it kind of stabilizes again. Anyway, yeah, so Central India is falling, and South India is going to stay neutral. There's like a clause in the thing so South India, I think, bought land, or maybe they took this land. Whenever South India took this land, there was a deal that they weren't allowed to go further, and to ensure that, Central India is allowed to keep armies in here. And basically what Central India does is they have these armies like officially take this land, and they twist South India's arm and basically say, we'll give you the land back if you join our side of the war. And that's exactly what they do. And with this, Central India is able to start pushing back, and things are already not going well for these guys. And you might think, wait, so then how is this going to turn the tide of the war? And well, we have to actually look at the north, because Yellow River Valley starts pushing their way into Korea, and they're actually doing really well. So it looks like, how is this going to change the tide of the war? But basically, Manchuria will start pushing in, and Manchuria has a secret power, which is they're actually really good at diplomacy, and they'll do a few things. They will promise Western Mongolia, hey, you know how you constantly have been wanting to unite with Eastern Mongolia? We will let you unite under your government if you attack Eastern Mongolia right now. And then they'll go to Eastern Mongolia and say, hey, Western Mongolia is planning to attack you. Maybe you should attack them first. And they will use their spies, realizing, yes, they're right, Western Mongolia is planning to attack us. And they will launch an attack against Western Mongolia. And this will go very swimmingly. But in exchange for that information, they did have to leave the war. And that means that all of the armies that you see in yellow just got a lot weaker because they were all supported by Mongolia. Area of North India, like these armies were mostly Mongolian in North India, and they'll kind of just fully retreat. These guys, West Yangtze was in charge of occupying North Burma, so North Burma's fine. And these guys are mostly Yellow River Valley troops, so they're fine, but it was North India that was really the front that suffers the most, as well as Korea, which will start getting pushed back by Japan. And these guys will then start negotiating with Yellow Valley and say, hey, you might be able to push us back, but it'll cause a lot of warfare and destruction. So why don't we make peace between specifically us two? And then you guys can focus on the South and we can focus on other people or whatever. And Yellow River Valley will actually say no, which is crazy, and Manchuria was not expecting that. But they did have a secret plan in case they said no, which was that a large portion of the stuff here, there were Mongolian troops here that are still fighting, and the Mongolian army has basically sent a letter down to here saying, hey, we're surrendering. These guys, however, Manchuria had a spy in Yellow Valley who had captured the messenger and basically said, we're going to release you when we want to. And they decide to release the messenger who says, hey, Mongolia has left the war because we just got a lot of land for free. And just like that, Central Yangtze is back in the war, as pretty much all of this yellow land is withdrawn from, and Central Yangtze will start invading into Yellow Valley, and Manchuria just shrugs and is like, you should have listened to us. China's invasion here is actually so pathetic that they start losing, and these guys are so busy occupying North Burma and fighting against the North Indian invasion that they're also losing. And things are going really badly right now. East India, with only one front to worry about, is able to start fighting back because of Defender's advantage, pretty much. As South India will basically just be like, why am I even in this war? And they'll try to leave, but these guys will be like, you're only leaving if you either give us some land or decide to weaken yourself in some way. And they actually have always been struggling to control Sri Lanka, as well as this territory. They hate the deal they have. So they are willing to do two things to weaken themselves in order to leave the war. First of all, this territory over here is ceded to their allies in the north. Sri Lanka is given independence. Both of these things are actually done because it'll actually stabilize the South Indian country. But from the defenders' perspective, it looks like South India just did a bunch of stupid stuff. So South India leaves the war. This angers This angers Central India very much, but what are they going to do? As North and East India are just completely destroying them. And Pakistan, without joining in on the alliance, will join in on the war and start destroying them as well. As once they're completely ejected from East India, they will be forced to sue for peace. And so they're out of the war. China has been doing really well in Vietnam for a really long time. They've pushed them all the way back to Singapore, but they're about to get pushed all the way back because they are kind of having to carry the entire alliance on their back at this point, and they're not doing very well at that. Basically, the entire alliance is collapsing as Vietnam retakes its capital. The Chinese Navy has completely sunk at this point, and so the Philippines are back and better than ever. And Japan is finally able to start doing its masterpiece, landing over here, taking the island of Taiwan with Filipino help. So I'm going to show that the Philippines have the southern half. as Yangtze kind of just collapses and surrenders. But I'm going to keep their color because I need to keep their color. I'm going to just erase it from the alliance if they surrender. So Yangtze surrendered. Hokkaido is not a thing anymore. And Central India, which is right here, they've surrendered. The next country to surrender will be West Burma or West Yangtze, who is allowed to surrender in exchange for not losing any land. And that means that this has fully fallen, and these guys are mostly Yellow River Valley troops who can't really get back to their homeland. So China starts trying to help these occupying forces out, but South Burma does still control these islands, and they relaunch an invasion, and with North Indian help, they retake all of this land as China is being pushed back. And at this point, China is willing to surrender as long as they don't lose any territory. And a lot of the Blue Alliance is willing to accept this, specifically the Indians. But unfortunately, that's not going to be accepted by the rest of the Blue Alliance, as the Yellow River Valley is completely crumbling, and they actually have pretty much a government collapse. And while they're forming a new government, their entire country just collapses, or their new government decides to leave the war, basically, which means that China is now all on their own, which means there's no point of having an alliance. But they still are refusing to surrender, hoping that by continuing to fight, they'll show people that it's better to just surrender, or to just sue for peace instead of having China surrender. However, Japan will prove them wrong, capturing the Chinese capital, taking the Chinese theocrat, and basically forcing him at sword point to surrender. So let's see what the peace treaty looks like. And I was thinking about doing a live peace treaty, but this will take even longer than the other one, so we're just going to fast forward to when the peace treaty is done. And after a really long time of making this is what the peace treaty looks like. So Japan obviously gains a ridiculous amount from this. The Philippines get the southern half of Taiwan. The rest is mostly self-explanatory. There's a lot of new countries, obviously, Sri Lanka included. All of the new countries were supposed to be monarchies, but a lot of them ended up willingly converting to theocracy, that being this country. Oh god, I'm going to have to come up with names. I'm going to call this Southern Manchuria. So that being Southern Manchuria, and I'll just call this West China. Those willingly converted to theocracies pretty much immediately as soon as they were founded. And Yellow River Valley got humiliated the most. China and Yangtze also did. West Yangtze didn't get humiliated because they surrendered, and that was part of their surrender conditions. Very bad if you were This was the most disastrous crusade in world history, for sure. I mean, look how badly this went for the Crusaders. But let's do some other stuff in the rest of the world. I guess it'll be kind of brief. I've been spending a lot of time in East Asia. Russia has no longer any land to expand into, and so they're finally going to have to start invading countries. And they are the most powerful country in the world at this point after the Crusades just failed miserably. It was probably Yellow River Valley or China before that, but now it's definitely these guys. But anyway, they hate theocracies, and the next theocracy for them to invade is going to be Serbia. And Serbia is really weak, and they will just kind of collapse and surrender over to the Russians, who will demand full annexation. And now they have a port in the Aegean with which they will build a city. And there was already kind of a port city there because Serbia needed that, but now it's like a really big city. Russia will also move their capital to a much more central city, which is in modern-day Ukraine. So I'm gonna keep calling them Russia, but their capital is in modern-day Ukraine. And they make it clear that they are hungry for more, but for now they will do nothing. The rest of the northern tip of Scandinavia will be divided up. No one's going to actually start living here, but they will be divided up between Estonia and Scandinavia, like so. And a major development is actually happening as West Africa is trying to become kind of a superpower. They literally don't border any other countries, so they really don't have that much work to do to become a superpower. They just kind of have to keep expanding into land that there's people in the white land, right? White means there's people there, but anyway, so yeah, they invade and take out Cape Verde. What I was saying is white means there's people there, but they're not part of empires. And there have been people who've moved, like, in this time, there have been people who've moved, like, all the way to, like, here. And West Africa is going to become kind of a superpower as they take advantage of this more so than the other countries. The new Ethiopian restoration will take some land. And there's not that many people living here, hence no cities. Actually, there's going to be some cities here, probably. At least once empires take them over. Some cities here, but not that many. But West Africa's population is also booming because they're kind of really, really rich. There's a lot of gold there and stuff. And I think the city of Timbuktu in real life is here, and that was important during this time period. So, although it's like in the Sahara now, maybe at this point it wasn't, I'm not really sure. But I feel like enough traders would be going through the Sahara that people would discover it. And West Africa will also take a large portion of the Sahara, with a few major cities popping up there as well. And the North African countries will take the rest of the Sahara. And this is mostly just claiming it for Morocco, but for Sahara and Egypt and Egypt and Sudan. But for Sahara, they actually like have a large population here because this is like their core territory essentially. All of the Saharan cities end up being part of Sahara, who also moves their capital to this other city that was in their territory that got founded when they got founded as a country, because it's just a much more central city to their country now. And yeah, Africa has been settled a lot during this episode, but West Africa is hungry for more, and they're kind of starting to act like the Mongols, as it is around the year 1250, which I think is when Genghis Khan's conquest started to... Actually, it's like after Genghis Khan. I think that he was like the 1100s, but whatever. We're going to have... Next episode, West Africa is going to do some expansion. But yeah, with that, let's end the episode here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.